Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really focusing on one thing, charting a clear path, a logical path, for building your first piece of algorithmic music. We're going to be looking closely at the structure outlined in our sources, specifically using, well, this specialized pure data library called Puredata.
Right.
And the goal is to understand what the source material calls the alogical path.
Yeah, and look, for anyone listening who's maybe curious about algorithmic composition, doesn't matter if you use Max or Super Collider or Puredata like we're discussing, the big takeaway here is structure.
Yeah.
Our sources really emphasize that this isn't some mystical process, it's not random noise. It's all about a sequence of deliberate choices.
Sequential decisions.
Exactly. We're basically breaking down the whole roadmap, showing you that exact flow that every signal follows, right from the very first digital pulse all the way to the final audio output. If you get the logic, you really get the music.
I like that focus on logic because, sometimes that word algorithmic, it sounds complicated, maybe a bit intimidating.
It can, yeah.
But what we're really doing is just mapping out a chain of cause and effect, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And like any good chain, this one has to start somewhere. Timing, I assume.
Absolutely. You got to start with time. To build any kind of algorithmic piece, you can't really start with just a boring, sterile click track. The whole system needs a rhythmic engine that feels alive from the start, as the sources put it.
Okay, so definitely not a standard metronome. We need something with variability, like baked in right from the beginning. What module handles that in this PETA setup?
That would be the modulated pulse generator. In the library, it's called Corpulsa Plus.
Corpulsa Plus SL.
Got it.
And the genius of using this, as the sources point out, is that it instantly gives you variations in density or groove, You get this sort of natural fluctuating rhythm without needing a whole lot of complex stuff upstream. It just provides that fundamental rhythmic bang that drives everything else.
Okay, that makes sense. That tackles that common problem you hear sometimes in early algorithmic stuff, that stiff kind of robotic rhythm.
Right. So Pulsa Plus gives us this like pulsing breathing rhythm, but that's still just timing pulses,
Yes.
right? It doesn't tell us which notes to play.
Exactly.
That decision where the actual raw melodic ideas come from, that has to be next.
Precisely. That's the job for the sequence engine. And in this specific path we're following, that engine is irregular.
Irregular. Okay.
So it gets that rhythmic bang from Repulsa plus A, and then it applies a rule. A specific preset algorithm could be accumulation, could be something linear, whatever you define. And this engine, it basically churns out the raw, unquantized sequence of pitch values. Think of it like a little statistical factory, just creating numbers based on its internal formula.
Right. And that's a really key distinction, I think, especially for listeners maybe coming from synthesis. The output here is totally abstract at this point.
Totally abstract.
It's just a stream of floating point numbers.
Yeah.
Just numbers.
Yeah.
Not a C note, not an F sharp. If you hook this straight up to a speaker, you just get noise. Yeah.
Pretty much. Noise with rhythm, maybe, but zero harmonic coherence.
Which brings us neatly to what feels like the biggest conceptual jump in this whole process. Taking those abstract numbers and making them, well, musically meaningful. How do we impose structure, harmony onto that raw data stream?
Yeah, that's the crucial translation step. And we do that using a really powerful gatekeeper module, the harmonic key. In Puredata, that's RMAPA plus MIPA. This module does the critical job of quantization. It takes that raw float value coming out of the sequence engine, or regula, and essentially forces it onto a specific, recognizable musical scale.
Okay. Here's where it gets really interesting then, because the parameters you feed into this module must define basically everything harmonically, right?
Exactly.
The example patch mentioned in the sources uses settings that map the input to a 7-note scale within 12 semitones.
That's right, diatonic.
So that takes the abstract math and turns it into usable MIDI pitches, like actual notes you can play on a keyboard. It's the moment that chaotic data stream gets logged into a musical key.
Yeah, but it's actually doing even more than just quantization. This node, Grama Peppa plus A, it's really designed to be the high-level harmonic control center. The sources really position it as this convergence point for all your big picture aesthetic decisions. It's set up to receive external data that controls both modal transposition.
Like major to minor or different modes.
Exactly. And also chromatic transposition. So changing the overall tonal center, the key.
Wow. Okay. So if this one single module is defining the entire tonal context, the key, the mode, the whole mood, really, doesn't that make it kind of fragile. Like, couldn't one little change fed into our mappa plus just throw the whole system completely off track?
Well, yes and no. That's sort of the inherent challenge, but also the power of this logical path approach. You can derail it, sure, but because the structure is designed to be transparent, you'll know exactly why it derailed.
Okay.
This module is meant to be that central point of intervention. You're not directly changing the notes one by one. Instead, you're changing the rule book the machine uses to interpret those raw numbers coming in.
Right.
It's like, turning a single dial and instantly shifting the whole feel from, say, C major to A minor. You define whether the performance sounds happy or melancholic purely through controlling this one central point.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've gone from a chaotic pulse, generated raw numbers, and then used a grump of plus to translate those into precise, quantized MIDI pitch values. We have musical notes.
We have musical notes.
Now we need to actually hear them, give that command a voice. So moving from structured data into the actual physical reality of sound generation.
Synthesis.
Right, the synthesis section. This is about timbre, the character of the sound, and also managing potentially many voices playing at once. So we start with defining the waveform using Rickatab 020. That selects the basic sound shape, could be a sine wave, a saw wave, whatever you load into the table.
Okay.
And crucially, the sources recommend setting up plenty of polyphony right from the start. That's usually done by patching into clone 20, which lets you have up to, 20 voices sounding simultaneously. 20 voices. Yeah, that's a good starting point if you want dense generative textures. But often, purely digital synthesis can sound a bit cold or thin on its own. Is there a secret sauce added here? Something can give the sound a bit more texture or warmth.
There is, yeah. It comes down to a couple of key modifiers right after the clone object. We see Artatune used, followed by a simple signal blender, Armix.
Artatune, okay, detuning.
And that detune, it's pretty much mandatory in this kind of architecture according to the sources. Its specific purpose is to add body to the sound.
Right.
Because perfect digital unison across all those clones can often sound quite thin, maybe a bit sterile. So adding a slight controlled detuning just thickens up the texture, makes it sound richer, maybe a bit more human, before it all gets combined in the mixer.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Adds that subtle richness. Okay, so we've got a rich, polyphonic, quantized signal now. It sounded pretty good, but it probably still exists in a kind of dry digital void, right?
Exactly. It needs context.
So the final stage of this logical path must be about giving the sound some acoustic space and maybe just as importantly, capturing the result.
That's it. This is the essential audio cleanup and finishing stage. The effects chain described typically starts with a filter, HIP 500.
HIP 500, high pass at 500 hertz.
Yep, and that frequency tells you its job. It's a high-pass filter specifically used to clean up low-end frequencies. In these kinds of dense, generative patches, low-end mud can build up really fast, so cutting that out is pretty critical for clarity.
Good practice. And then to give the signal that sense of space, that acoustic breathing room.
That's where reverb comes in. Rev 10, a reverb unit. Its main purpose at this stage isn't complex sound design, it's simply to add depth. Just taking the sound out of that dry digital realm and placing it into some kind of imagined acoustic space.
Nice.
And then finally, the signal needs to actually go somewhere. The logical path includes parallel routing here, which is quite neat.
Okay.
The signal goes to the main audio output, which is RRU DAC, for the digital to analog converter.
Right, so you can hear.
But it also goes simultaneously to the air record module,
Right.
which ensures that every performance, everything the algorithm generates, is captured instantly as a .wav file, ready for immediate archiving or maybe later mixing.
That's very practical. No lost moments.
No lost moments.
Okay, so we've traced this whole automated path now, from pulse to scale to sound to effects to recording, which kind of brings us to the big question. What's the human's job in all this?
Right.
The system is handling the notes, the timing, the synthesis. What does the performer actually do?
Well, the sources are pretty clear on this. Almost every single parameter along that logical path we just walked through is exposed, ready for real-time manipulation. So your role as the performer, it shifts dramatically. You're not playing the notes anymore. You are steering the logic. You become like the conductor of the machine.
Steering the logic. I like that. So you're interacting with the rules themselves.
Exactly. We sometimes call this hot action. You're manipulating the rules while the music is unfolding.
Okay, give me some examples. What kind of things could you do live?
Well, you could intervene live on the pulse rate of that Repulsa Plus module, instantly shifting the tempo or the groove.
Right, speed it up, slow it down, make it more erratic.
Yeah. Or you could adjust the accumulation ratio or whatever rule you've set in the irregular sequence engine. That would change the melodic density on the fly, more notes, fewer notes.
Hmm.
Or, probably most powerfully, you could tweak those harmonic control parameters feeding into remappa plus sesh. Instantly change the entire key or mode of the piece as it's playing.
That's fascinating. It's like, you know how a conductor doesn't actually play an instrument in the orchestra, but their subtle gestures, their direction, can completely change the emotional shape of the music.
That's a great analogy. It's very much like that.
But the sources mention one specific intervention that sounds particularly intriguing for expressing artistic taste. Changing the seed of a deterministic object, like something called motivo, perhaps. How does changing one number, a seed, become an act of performance?
Ah, the seed. Yeah, that's a really core concept in deterministic systems like this. The seed is basically the starting point for the machine's internal random number generation, except it's not truly random, it's pseudo-random, meaning it's deterministic.
Okay.
So when you change the seed, you're not introducing chaos, you are instantly shifting the entire system state to a different but still fully formed and structurally sound, melodic, and rhythmic evolution.
Wow.
It's like telling the system, okay, explore this particular possibility space now. It becomes your signature, in a way, your aesthetic choice applied right at the root level of the system's rules. You're picking a different starting point on the map, but the map itself is still logical.
So the beauty of this whole logical path idea, then, is that even if the music that comes out is completely new, maybe even surprising to you as the performer, you always know the exact sequence of logical steps, the chain of cause and effect that led to that sound.
That's the absolute core promise here. You will always know why it sounds the way it does, even if you didn't know exactly what it was going to sound like beforehand. That transparency, that structure, it allows for informed aesthetic choices. It makes the whole process one of maybe discovery rather than just blind luck.
Okay, so we've successfully navigated the entire logical path. We defined algorithmic composition, in this context at least, as this four-stage process, starting with pulsation and timing.
Right, the repulsa plus and irregular.
Then transitioning through that crucial structure-defining mapping phase with our mappa plus
The harmonic gatekeeper.
Then generating the actual sound during synthesis, using things like orditab, clone, and orditune.
Giving it voice and body.
And finally, finishing up with refinement and output filtering, reverb, and recording.
Polishing and capturing. Hip, Revel 1, air recurred.
So what does this all mean for the creator, for the musician using these tools?
Well, I think it means we have to sort of redefine creativity a little bit in this context.
Yeah.
We're shifting from composing notes, maybe, to designing systems, designing the logic. But it definitely leaves us with that really interesting tension, doesn't it? Especially around that seed concept we talked about. If your fundamental artistic taste, your main act of performance, is expressed by changing the seed of the deterministic system, basically telling the machine to explore a different one of its pre-programmed logical paths, then how much of the composition that results is truly a performance of your artistic will?
Yeah.
And how much is it simply you discovering the inherent logical potential that was already built into the machine's structure?
That is a fascinating line to walk, isn't it? Authorship versus automation, choice versus discovery. Well, if you, the listener, are ready to start skewering logic, exploring the power of these sequence engines and mapping controls for yourself, it sounds like that logical path is definitely laid out and waiting for you. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.